evening, everybody. This is AKA Heather Joy, and I am streaming both to the Lifeboat channel and my own channel, AKA Heather Joy, this evening. And so I just want to welcome everybody, and glad you're here. Whew. Okay, before I get started, let's run through the rules. Number one, on the Lifeboat, we don't discuss politics unless, well, it's all up to Tommy's discretion. But we try to avoid that unless there are certain political aspects that have a lot to do with drugs at the moment, and yeah, we'll talk about those at times. But other than that, no politics. The second one, this is not a religious channel. You might hear people say things like, "Hey, I'll pray for you," or I couldn't have found sobriety without my faith. Those things are fine. But if you ever say something like, my God is better than your God, or, these are the reasons why you're not getting into heaven, those absolutely not okay. So, oh boy, the third one, please refrain from any foul language, both in, the live chat and the comment section. As Tommy always says, if you can't control your mouth, then you can't control your life. And, I wholeheartedly agree with him on that one. And number 4, there is absolutely no place on the Lifeboat or my channel for trolls, for mean people. A lot of people really enjoy the anonymity of the internet, and they can be very cruel to people. Because they aren't being seen, but there's no place on either channel for that. People come here for support and to learn things that are going to help them, in their journey towards, good mental health and towards sobriety. There's just no place for that. This is a place where when people want to be open and honest about what they're going through, and other people are sharing things in support, people need to be protected in those cases. So just a warning, if you are going to be mean, you're going to be banned permanently from either channel. So oh boy, guys, I was going to talk tonight about a dopamine detox, and I was just I had everything ready. I was, I'd made my notes in my book and everything. And then I found this article and I read it, and I thought, okay, that's what I'll do in the morning for tomorrow morning's live stream. But something about this, there's something pushing me to do this now. And I feel like this is an important one. There must be somebody, that's listening that needs this message, or because I don't know why I feel so strongly about doing this tonight. Maybe I'm just going to lose my nerve. I don't know. Anyway, you guys are getting a very different one than what I had planned on earlier today. And because of that, I am terrified. I'm going to be sharing some things tonight with you guys that I never intended to share with anyone but the journal that I had written it down in. But for some reason, I feel very strongly that I need to tell you about that. And like I said, there must be somebody listening that needs to hear this. And, I made a deal with God a long time ago when I was probably 19 or 20, when my journey started towards trying to find, better mental health. And I was in a hospital, and I made a deal with God, and I said, if you will help me get through this, I will do what you ask of me to help other people get through this as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tell you guys some things tonight that I never dreamt I would ever talk about. But if this can help somebody else, then I'll do it, So, but anyway, to get started, there's a couple of different things that I need to touch on before I get into the meat of things. and it'll all tie together. But it's the first thing I just wanted to address is, I don't have TikTok on any of, on my laptop or my phone or my tablet or anything, because I don't know, it would be a waste of time for me. I'm afraid I would get a little bit too into something, and I'd get caught up in it, and I'd want to watch one video after the other. There's that constant dopamine dump every time, and I don't need that. I got too many other things to do. But I do notice a lot of people on YouTube, but will gather different things that they see on TikTok and put them together to make a video of it, and they'll talk about it. And one of the trends, I guess, on TikTok is there are a lot of young people that are faking mental illnesses and mental disorders. I guess because they get the attention, they get clout, whatever. But it kind of disturbs me, for one thing, because people that have serious mental illnesses and need to be taken seriously and need people to believe them and to listen to them, and to get the help they need, this is not a good thing, because if people are coming on and faking things, like a big one, I guess, right now is they are faking that they have dissociative identity disorder, which is a new term for multiple personality disorder. And it's, first of all, it's a very rare disorder. And as I've been in psych wards as a patient, and I've also been a psych ward nurse, and I've seen it just a few times, actual true cases. And the people that are suffering from it do not want to talk about it at all. They want to hide. It has destroyed their lives. It's destroyed their families. It's not something that you would be happy that you've been diagnosed with. You wouldn't be telling the whole world about what you're experiencing, which is one of the reasons why I don't want to talk about the things I'm going to talk about tonight. But, it really bothers me. I think it's going to end up doing a lot of damage. But it blows my mind that all these young kids come on and they'll fake that they have multiple personalities, or that they have Tourette's, or that they're autistic, and they're happy about it, and it's just so confusing to me. But I've noticed that's a trend, and it does disturb me. Anyway, moving on. That's just one of the things I wanted to touch on. But second one I want to talk about is, years ago, I came across an article from, I think it was Psychology Today or something. I have it somewhere in my files, but the article was about the damage that children incur when they grow up in a home where one, if they have both parents in the house and one spouse is being very cruel and abusive to the other spouse. It's very detrimental to the children that witness that. But it's horrible, I'm sure, to watch a father beat up on a mother, physically, the physical abuse, or vice versa. But what was really interesting about the article was that it said that witnessing the mental and emotional abuse, of one spouse to another, that, watching that and hearing and seeing what that would do, was more detrimental than witnessing physical abuse. And I remember the first time I read that article, I reread it because I'm like, okay, this explained a lot to me, because I had witnessed my mother just ripping my father apart with her words. just the things that she would say to him and the way that she tore him down, the way that, just it was horrible. And I watched what it did to my dad over the years. And I'll never forget, he got so depressed. And, the longer this went on, the worse it got. It used to I would just lay in bed at night awake, worrying about my dad. He was a truck driver, so he was often gone from home, and he'd want to just, when he'd get to come home, he'd want to come home and relax and be with his family and just enjoy himself. And my mother has well, at the time, had some very serious mental illness of her own going on, and was the reason she was acting that way in the first place. And to this day, I don't think she can remember even doing it. But I'll never forget the time that my dad was so depressed, and they had a horrible fight, and my dad grabbed his gun and took off out the back door. And I saw him, and I followed him out there. And I don't remember after that. I know I went after him, but I can only remember stepping out the back door. And that's all I remember anymore. But I know I stopped him, from shooting himself. But that's how badly this toll it had taken on his mental well-being. And it just, so, when I read that article, it made so much sense to why I hurt so bad inside. It made so much sense. But, it really, I've seen that, as being a psychiatric nurse, I've seen that with many, many patients who had experienced very similar things. And it did the same thing to them as it did to me. It just rips you up inside. Just confuses you. I apologize. It's so scary for me because I know how emotional I get. I'm gonna keep going, guys. The next thing that I want to touch on is I want to talk about psychosis for a minute. I've seen this as a nurse, and I've experienced it as a patient, both. Psychosis is, basically when you aren't functioning in reality. And I'm sure I have been psychotic a lot more than I can remember, but there are specific instances that I can remember. One of the problems I had in my 30s and 40s was hallucinations. Visual ones where I would, see people or animals or things that weren't actually there. That was a problem at times. Sometimes I would become obsessed with an idea or a thought, and those thoughts would become rather delusional. And nothing off the top of my head clicks as far as one example, but I know that it happened a lot. But the psychosis that I think I struggled with the most was auditory hallucinations, where I would hear people speaking to me that weren't there, and it wasn't just a thought in my head, or a voice inside my head. It was as if someone was sitting right here next to me speaking. It was that clear. And there were many times that I had command hallucinations where the voice that I was hearing would tell me to do something that would harm myself. And I have scars. I've got a scar on my arm right here from a knife. I stabbed my arm. I have one on my stomach. I've stabbed myself in the stomach. I have one on my left thigh where I have stabbed myself. It was very troubling. But what was more difficult about it was that at first, when I was telling my psychiatrist that I was hearing these voices and things that they didn't believe me, because typically, uh, when people experience a psychotic break, it usually comes between the ages of 17 and 25. And that's usually when people are going to be diagnosed with schizophrenia or affect, good grief, affective. I apologize, it just slipped my mind. Um, but it's what my diagnosis has been for a long time, and I've had multiple diagnoses. I started out with being told I was just, major depression and anxiety, and then it went to being bipolar, and then it went to a couple other things. But I think the final one that I had was schizoaffective disorder. That's what it's called, where you struggle with your moods. Some people with this diagnosis are kind of bipolar, and they'll fluctuate between mania and depression, but then they have the hallucinations of some type at the same time, and that's has been my diagnosis for the last, I don't know, 20 years anyway. But it was a very scary time, because this didn't start to happen to me where I was having hallucinations of these sorts until I was in my 30s. And so I was told I was a malingerer, that I was making it up, or that I was, and I think it was when the first time that I actually stabbed myself, that people went, oh wait, she's serious. This is serious. She's not faking this. But it was very frustrating not being believed. And I'm sure it set back my progress. And, it definitely ruined the trust that I had between the psych nurse and my psychiatrist at the time too. And that's unfortunate where I live, because at the moment, I don't believe we have a psychiatrist in this area. It's a problem trying to keep them in our area, because we are a rural area. But that can be a problem. And I was thinking about that today, and I wonder, I've spoken about this before, where if you are an addict, when you're in your active addiction, it stops all of your development, your growth, as far as your mental and emotional faculties go. And I wonder if my addiction set me back, and maybe that's why I was experiencing these psychotic breaks, in my 30s and 40s. I seriously wonder, and I'm not sure who to reach out to. I want to run this by a professional and just see what they have to say about this, because I'm thinking that's had a lot to do with why I was experiencing these issues, so much later than most people. But I don't know. Anyway, um, let's see. I can remember another time, just to give you another example. This is nothing I'm proud of at all, guys, but I did spend 6 months in the state hospital here in Utah, and that was not an easy time. I look back at it now, and in a way, I'm grateful that I had that experience, because I got to observe a lot of the other patients. And, there's not a whole lot to do while you're there. They'll have group therapies and different activities, several days a week. But most of the time, if you're in the state hospital, you've got to find things to do. So I spent a lot of time getting to know the other patients on the wing where I was. And I found it, in a way, a lot of it was fascinating, talking to some of these other people that were schizophrenic. Especially, they were very interesting people to talk to. And I remember one gentleman in particular I watched, and he was schizophrenic, and he had been from the time, I believe, he was 18. But it was fascinating to watch him because when he was out in the group area, he's very quiet and he didn't speak up much. But when he went into his bedroom, and my room was across the hall from his, and I would just listen to him, and he would carry on, whole conversations with 2 and 3 people all at the same time. And it was really fascinating just to listen to the conversations. It definitely gave you something to do in those long days, but it really was fascinating. And then and it made me understand just how much people with mental illness really suffer, what it does to them because of their families, turning their backs on them, and their friends turning their backs on them, and things like that. I saw an incredible amount of suffering while I was there. But it was very fascinating. It really opened my mind to so many things that I had previously studied. I'll never forget the one time. It was right after the last time I overdosed. This would have been 2002, and it was bad. And I was going into serotonin syndrome, which is a very dangerous, dangerous thing to be in. And I remember they put me, after they medically cleared me, they moved me from a medical floor to psych floor. And this was actually at LDS Hospital in Salt Lake City, where I was at the time. And I don't remember how many weeks I was there. I don't have any memory of getting there. And I don't remember about the first 3 weeks. But I remember all of a sudden coming to, and I was sitting on the psych ward. I had no idea where I was. I had no idea how I had come there. It was the most disorienting feeling ever. Just, oh wow, it was awful. Just, big chunks of your life just missing. And it really helped me understand a lot of the other patients when I was at the state hospital, because they were having these things happen to them very frequently, and it broke my heart because I knew what they were going through, and I know how disorienting it is. Not fun. But again, now I look back at it all now, and I'm kind of grateful because at least I have a better understanding of what other people go through. And because of that, I can talk to people on their level, and they know I'm speaking the truth, because I can tell them what I've been through, and they're going through the same things. It really helps. You make connections with other people, and over time you can encourage them to get the help they need, that kind of thing. So I really am grateful. But you guys, this life has not been easy. Oh boy. But okay, I got one more thing I want to tell you guys about, and this is a big part of today's live stream. I remember, I believe I was 22 at the time, and I was on this was my second nursing job since I graduated from nursing school. And all of these things, started coming back to me, just all these memories from my past, the things that had gone on in our house, things, that I'd seen happen to my dad, and things that my mother had said and done to me. Just there were a lot of things that I had forgotten about or repressed that were coming back. And it was just a very difficult time. I was trying to work full time. I had 2 very small children, and it was a rough time. And I knew that I needed to get help for these things. And I was so incredibly angry at my parents, my mother, because her illness, her behavior, but also my father, because he had put up with it. And I remember being so angry. And, my father had passed away, and that just left my mother, and I wanted to confront someone. I was so angry. Yeah, and my mother was in no place to be on the receiving end of that. But, I didn't care. I wanted to confront her. I wanted some answers. I wanted to know why. I wanted to know how deeply it had affected me and what it had done to my life. I was incredibly angry, be the key word there. And I can't even remember anymore if I called her on the phone or what. But I confronted her, and I told her how angry I was and all of the things that I could remember. And she had no, either she was lying to me about it, or she honestly didn't have any memory of those things. But it was not the response I was hoping for. And rather than listening to me, and really listening to me, she just got defensive. And of course she was very angry. And if you have no memory of doing something and you're accused of something, I'm sure that's very disconcerting. She was very angry. But it didn't end there. She ended up calling all of my siblings and telling them everything that I had accused her of. And so I started getting all these phone calls from my siblings as well, and which was very confusing because I had very distinct memories of things that had gone on and things that had happened. And yeah, it was hard to take. It really it made me really question my mind. Am I totally crazy? I knew I wasn't making it up. It wasn't something I just created in my head. I wasn't doing it for attention. These were extremely painful memories, extremely painful things that I was remembering. And, I just wanted so badly for my mother to understand what it had done to me. Didn't, just, it wasn't the experience that I was hoping for. And I made a big mistake right there, right there. I had, by this time I was um, depending more and more upon prescription pain pills, prescription narcotics, to deal with everything that I was going through. And for my siblings to say, "Oh, that didn't happen," and my mother to say, "I never did that. I never said that." It was so frustrating. And I questioned, am I crazy? Questioned my sanity. But I couldn't deny the memories I held up here. And I came to the conclusion that, this is the response that I'm going to get, and people aren't going to believe me, and I'm not going to get anywhere by trying to process these things with my family, that I was just not going to do it at all. And that's when my addiction got very bad. From that point on, it got very bad. It was a big mistake. What I should have done was found a therapist and started, working through these things. And it wrecked my relationship with my siblings and my mother. How could it not? But I've learned a lot since then. But I just remember an incredibly difficult time, and it was just so frustrating when you have very distinct memories of experiencing something, and then being told it never happened. Very frustrating, very damaging. I was already in a rather brittle state as far as my mental health went. Wasn't for the best. So really, that is when my addiction, after that, I thought, you know what, fine. If this is the way it's going to be, I'm just going to numb myself as much as I possibly can. And I sure tried for a very long time. Oh boy. Like I said, I'm never going to speak of these things in front of other people, tell you what it's like to not be in touch with reality and to be so confused and to have hallucinations and things. But this is why I seriously wonder if that addiction didn't just stop any further growth, and I was already stunted as far as my emotional development, just because of the house I grew up in, the things that had happened. I was already stunted. My emotional intelligence at that time was not good. I couldn't handle any type of stress or any kind of crisis. It was just a very difficult time. And so I really wonder if the my addiction really slowed everything else down. And that's why I didn't start to have these psychotic symptoms pop up until much later, where generally it's between 17 and 25 when people will have their first psychotic break, things like that, and of course you can have them after that too, but the first one generally comes in that time. And that's what I have seen most of the time, being a psych nurse. That's what I have seen. So what happens? What happens when you aren't validated? What does that do? I like I told you guys at the beginning, I came across this article today, and it was addressing this very thing. And it was there's two, I believe they're both psychiatrists. I didn't have time to look up each of the people, but there's the gentleman that wrote the article that I read today. His name is Daniel Mackler, and either a therapist or a psychiatrist, not sure which, but he was referring to a conversation that he had with another lady that is a professional. She is a psychiatrist, and her name, I believe, is Ann Silber. But one of the things I guess they spend a great deal of time speaking of back and forth with one another is psychosis. And she said something remarkable, and I want to read you just a little portion of what she said about this. But actually, I want to back up for a second and just say, first of all, psychiatric care has come a long way. In the 19th century, in Victorian asylums, I want to just share with you. Oh no, I just bumped that out. Let's see. I'm going to share with you a couple of the reasons why people used to be put in asylums. And I'll show you how far we have come, okay? The very first one listed is just great excitement. Who doesn't get excited about something at one time or another? But if you were extremely excited, that might be a reason to be put in an asylum. Disobeying your husband or your parents, and who hasn't done that? But yeah, that could be a reason why you would be put in an asylum if you tried to leave your husband. Yeah. And how young were brides when they were in in the 1900s, especially the early 1900, the 1800s, in the early 19th century, women got married quite a bit younger, when they weren't completely developed. They weren't done developing physically or mentally and emotionally. And dementia would be another reason you could be put in there. Melancholy is what they used to call it. Depression, but being deeply depressed would be another one. Having extreme anxiety. Epilepsy would be another reason that you could be put in an asylum. Having Down syndrome, having a psychotic break, having a breakdown could put you in there. I mean, there's some crazy reasons. If you ever visit, what is it, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, my baby sister did ghost tour and a ghost hunt a couple of years back at that place. And I guess it's a very remarkable building. Yeah, has a lot of history, but she took a picture of the many reasons why people were put in that asylum, and it was just crazy, just the reasons why people could be locked up for the rest of their lives. We've come a long way. But I was also thinking about the treatment of these, different issues that people would have. Some of them were just absolutely barbaric and horrible, but one of the big ones was restraints of all kinds, whether you'd be placed in a chair and your ankles would be locked down, and then your wrists on the on the arms of the chair, and you'd be just tied there. They had these adult size crib type restraints where they'd lay a person down and then they just put this cover down over them so they couldn't escape. I mean, that's another one. I mean, there were just any way you can think of being restrained. It was done. I remember there was another treatment that they used to use, where they would put people in a spinning chair and then just spin them. They and the doctors at the time were thinking that if everything is already a mess up here and things are discombobulated, perhaps spinning them around would make things better. I know that they did a lot of cold therapy where they would just spray people with hoses with really cold water, or they'd put them in cold water. I mean, ice baths and things like that. Just anything they could think of that would hopefully knock people out of the psychosis they were in, or what have you. We have come a long way, and there's been a huge change in the way that medicine treats psychiatric illness now. And I am very grateful that I wasn't born a few centuries earlier, because I would definitely been locked up for my entire life. There wouldn't have been any chance of getting better. And it breaks my heart. People they rotted away in those places. It was horrible. We have come a long way. Okay, let me jump back to that article that I was just telling you about that I read today. They were talking about what is really behind when people have their first psychotic break, which again generally happens between 17 and 25. And I want to read to you what let's see what the one psychiatrist said. Okay, this is what she told the guy that wrote the article. She said, I've been thinking a lot about the subject of psychosis. You know what I think it really is? I think it's just horrible things that little children went through when they were very, very young. Terrible things that they went through that they couldn't deal with, and they buried and they split off. And I just want to remind you, I've been following Dr. Gabor Mate, and all of his research is showing how, even as infants can pick up on the stresses that the mother is going through, and they will change their behavior because of it. But, that anything traumatic, regardless of your age, something really traumatic will give structural changes in your brain and chemical changes. So to me, it makes sense. Okay. But continuing, I want to read you the rest of this quote. That she said, it's not really even a sickness or a disease at all. As psychiatry says, really what it is they are trying to reprocess. They're trying to make sense of what they went through. They're trying to understand it, work through it. And so it's actually a very healthy process to make sense of it. And I totally agree with her. Now, what I added is that's not all what the mental health field says. And what's also interesting, I said, is this. I've heard so many people say, yeah, but that's not what my son or daughter is going through when they had their psychotic episode at 17, 18, 19, 20, because they never had a traumatic experience like that. They never had profound abandonments or traumas. They never went through severe loneliness or anything like that. That's not something that my child went through. And okay, yeah, that's all I wanted to read of that. But when I read that, when I first read that today, I went, wow, I think they've hit on something. I have always felt that way about that too. And so it was incredibly validating to me to read that. And okay, I'm not the only one that has been thinking that that is what causes psychotic breaks and psychosis. And in this article, it explains how when people have a psychotic break like that, to the rest of the world, particularly to the people the adults around that person that has a psychotic break, and to people that treat it, you can see that it doesn't seem to be based in reality at all. And a lot of times you will see something where they call it word salad, where people are just talking, but it's just the words don't, aren't, they aren't, the words that are coming out of their mouth the words don't seem to be related to one another. When you see somebody going through this, and I was just thinking too, I another experience that I've had, and I remember when I realized that I was having a psychotic break, what was happening was I don't remember what was happening, but I remember how I reacted to it. I ended up getting dressed. My husband told me, okay, you need to get dressed. You need to get up, get cleaned up, get on with your day. It was a time when I was really, really struggling. And I remember getting dressed and presenting myself to him. And he looked at me like, what? And I remember, this is what I remember. I remember looking down. I had put my clothes on first. I put my jeans on and a shirt on, and then I'd put my underwear on and my bra on top of it. And I remember looking down and thinking, wait, well, why did I do that? It just, it happens, and I'm sure to my husband, it didn't make any sense at all. And honestly, to me, it didn't make any sense at all. But I bet you if I could remember what was going on and what it was I was dealing with at the time, what I was trying to process, that anything it had, bet you, sorry, speaking too quickly, bet you anything had something to do with something that went on when I was very, very small. Bet you anything. But, it just, when I read that article today, I went, wow, people are getting it. People are starting to make sense of this thing. But what is really sad is the way that these things are treated. As being a psych nurse, one of the primary things we would do is medicate people. People were psychotic, and they were talking absolute nonsense, or they were, incredibly, I think it's the word I want, but they're acting, their behaviors and the things that they're doing with their bodies are just completely crazy to you. They don't seem to make sense at all. Just the crazy, wild things that people can do when they're in that state. It really doesn't make sense to you. And psychiatrists, will try to medicate it. And as a psych nurse, I remember giving many shots of Haldol to people that were having a psychotic break. I remember, begging patients, please, if you don't calm down, if you don't stop this behavior, whatever it was they were doing, we're going to have to restrain you. And, if somebody's in a high psychotic state, and they're kind of in that flight or fight mode as well, these people can be incredibly strong, because in their mind something else is going on, and to be surrounded by a bunch of people who want to restrain you is I'm sure is terrifying. I know it's happened to me too. I don't remember, but I don't think like that had happened to me before I have been restrained. But I don't think that's quite the way of dealing with it. Because according to this article, if patients that are having a psychotic break are listened to, first of all, if someone can sit down with them and just listen to them and listen to what they're going through, that is incredibly helpful. Um, and being allowed to just be themselves, in their mind, something that happened a very, very long time ago, possibly when they were still an infant. They're trying somehow to process all of that and come to terms with it and make sense of it so they can move on. Pumping someone full of chemicals is not going to help that. And, in many instances, people do need to be restrained because they are going to hurt someone else or themselves. But if you could just be allowed, if you're in that state, if you can be allowed to work through that instead of it being all suppressed by a chemical, how much better off are you going to be? And so I think in many ways, when it comes to psychosis, I don't think that medicine is dealing with this quite right. And I remember reading an article a long time ago about how other cultures manage mental illness when someone is going through that in their community. And there's one, I don't remember what country in Africa it was, but it's definitely a third world country. And when people are experiencing psychosis and they're not quite there in reality with everybody else, these people are actually respected, and if they are having conversations with people that the rest of the tribe cannot see, they actually they look at that as this person is actually very special. They call that person a healer, and they aren't restrained, they aren't full of chemicals, and they actually end up turning to that person for all kinds of different things that require healing. And I love the way that they see mental illness as something completely different, and they believe that those people are actually gifted. And I in some ways I really like that in some ways. But this is a difficult thing. If a person is psychotic and they are going to hurt themselves or hurt someone, of course you've got to restrain them. But I remember being on some very heavy duty antipsychotics. I couldn't feel anything. I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I just existed. It's not fun. And you feel incredibly drugged, but not in a good way. And I honestly don't think I had any benefit from any of the antipsychotics that I have ever been on. And I remember, even after I was sober, I was still having multiple problems for a while. And I remember in 2016, that was really the year I just woke up and finally became myself. But one of the things I did, I had just something deep inside me that said, you need to quit taking this and this and this. And they were all some heavy duty antipsychotics. And I was having to go in every week to have all of my meds filled for the week by a psych nurse. And so, they question you every time you went in there about your behaviors and your thinking, everything. They're trying to, and if I had told them that that I wasn't taking my meds anymore, they would have freaked out, and I would have been forced. Most likely I would have been admitted somewhere. And as long as I, did not take my meds, they would have given me shots, and I would have been forced to take my medication. And that honestly didn't do me any good. I wasn't making any progress as far as my my therapy and things, because I couldn't feel. If you can't feel your feelings, you can't process them. I don't know. I find antipsychotics incredibly damaging in many cases. And I'm not saying, if any of you are on them, to run out and just quit taking them. No, no, please don't misunderstand me. That's not what I'm saying. That's really something that you should talk with your doctor about, honestly. But I remember reading that article early today and just going, wow, because I always felt that you know chemical restraints aren't helpful. They don't get to the core issue. So why am I talking about this? Why am I telling you guys some of the worst experiences I've had in my life? Why would I do that? It's because I want you guys to understand several things. Number one, you can overcome anything. I'm sitting here in front of this camera today talking to you guys and sharing these things with you is huge. That I can string sentences together is huge. I was very different. Just even a decade ago, very different person. I didn't get much done. There was, I really was just existing. I didn't have quality of life. And I'm very grateful to be where I am now. But the reason I'm sharing these things with you is, first of all, like I said, I want you guys to understand that healing can happen, and it doesn't matter what point in your life you are. You can heal from the traumatic things you have been through. And if you are one of the people on the lifeboat listening to me right now, there most likely there is something very deep, very traumatic that has happened to you, that is behind your addiction, that caused you to want to escape from it in the first place. And I promise you can figure out what that is, and you can get the treatment and the help that you need, and you can overcome it. And it's incredibly freeing when you get to that point, when you figure out what it is that is disturbing you so deeply. It's not fun and it's not easy. But if you want to be sober, if you want to have a good life, to have good quality of life, to have good relationships, it's something that you need to do. And I promise you, you can do this. You can overcome anything that has happened to you, no matter how ugly or how bad it is. And when you do that, you become so much stronger, so much stronger, and life becomes so much better when you're not in pain all the time. And when you take care of that core issue, that urge and those cravings to take your drug of choice, or whatever it is that you do to escape from that pain, it can go away. It really can. And I don't know who it is that needs to hear this, but I have been so bad off, guys. Imagine what it takes to be put in a state hospital. I was really bad off. I am 100% the other direction now. It's still a challenge. Things aren't always easy. Life is never perfect for anybody. But dang, my life is so much better. And it's rewarding now. And I love reaching out and trying to help other people. And I just really want you guys, whether it's on the lifeboat or my channel, I want you to understand it does not matter what you've been through. You can overcome it.
And if you have been through something similar to the experience that I had when I first tried to confront my family about all the stuff that had gone on, it was an absolute disaster. And it made me question my reality. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that has experienced that. I I want you to not give up. Don't do what I did and turn to a behavior or a drug or alcohol to numb yourself. Please don't do that. I know it's incredibly scary facing things that you tried to push away for so long. It's not easy, but I promise you it can be done. You guys can do this. You can find that life is beautiful and it's wonderful and relationships can be fantastic. Life can be worth living. Really fun. You can find sobriety too. It is incredibly wonderful. Do this, guys. You do this. And again, I just repeat, if you have had an experience where you were told you were crazy or that you were making it up or, what have you, if you have been through something like that, please do not give up. Even if you find like the experience I had where when I was dealing with so many hallucinations, especially the auditory ones, and not being believed that it was actually going on. If something like that happens to you, find a different doctor, find a different therapist. Don't give up. You can do this. Seriously, you can do this. And, if anybody has experienced anything like this or you have questions, what have you, please reach out to me. My email is in the description box. Goodness, was that I hope that was everything that I wanted to cover today, but let me flip over here and just see who is in chat. Noise Opera, Miss V, Cultivate Kindness, Charles McClellan, John Doe, Zenwin, Ghost of Stacy, Popolina, Mr. Ray Ray, Charlie Mullins. Who else have we got here? Ladybug. Hey, Ladybug. Spanx Calhoun. Dennis N. Scott Nay. Hey, let's see. Tommy Bird. Who else have we got here? Miss Dragon. Goodness. Scooby. I just love it that you guys put up with me, that you guys listen through a show, because I know I'm not Tommy. I'm not a public speaker at all. I'm just excited that you guys come and listen to me anyway. Thank you. Crazy Cat. Let's see. Wharton is here. Who else? If I miss anybody, I apologize. Let's see. Dennis Brace is here. Cindy Party. Goodness. I hope I haven't missed anyone. That looks like, and Mark. Oh, and Mark is there too. All right. Well, like I said, if anyone has any questions or you want to talk about anything that I have talked about today, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to talk to you. Tomorrow morning, I'll be talking about dopamine detox. I found a book that I've been reading, and I want to share with you kind of a book report in a way, share with you what I learned from it, and maybe it will help some of you. But let's see, just looking to see if I missed anybody else. Todd G, hey, that's a name I don't recognize. I am glad you're here. I'm so glad all of you are here, whether it's the Lifeboat or my own channel. I really am doing this because of that deal I made with God a long time ago, that if he helped me get through this, I would do the same. I would try to help other people. Had no idea when I made that deal that this would take 30 years and some really ugly times. But I am who I am, and I am strong because of everything I've been through. And it's possible for all of you as well. I promise you. I hope you guys have a great night. I will see you guys in the morning. And I hope you have, like I said, I hope you have a great night. Reach out if you need help, or, just incredible thing about the lifeboat is just that we share ourselves with one another. We support each other, and it's incredibly helpful. When people believe you, when they listen to you, does more good than you possibly imagine. And I'm sure many of you, if you have not been believed, especially when it's something very important to you, that's devastating. And, that's, let's try and avoid that. Just please reach out. Don't isolate yourself, especially if you're struggling. Uh, Reach out. Okay. I'll talk to you guys in the morning.